From an early age, we were taught to obey the will of others, to fulfill our duties, to serve our country, our team, our political party, our company, our state, our ideology, anyone but ourselves who come last. Everyone, to one degree or another, has a sense of duty, responsibility, necessity, guilt. Each person, in one way or another, serves in various social groups and organizations: family, club, educational institution, company, political party, state, etc. All these structures arise and develop when a separate group of people begins to think and act in one direction. Then new people join and the structure grows, gains strength, forces its members to follow established rules, and can eventually subjugate large sectors of society. At the level of material realization, the structure consists of people united by common goals and material, objects such as buildings, structures, furniture, equipment, appliances, etc. But what is behind all this at the energetic level? The structure arises when the thoughts of a group of people are directed in one direction, and therefore the parameters of mental energy are identical. The mental energy of individuals creates an interference pattern in the energy field. In this case, in the middle of the ocean of energy, a separate independent energy information structure is created, an energy pendulum. This structure begins to live its own life and subordinates the people involved in its creation to its own laws. Why a pendulum? Because the stronger it swings, the more people, adherents, feed it with their energy. Each pendulum has its own characteristic vibration frequency. For example, a swing can only swing by applying force at a certain frequency. This frequency is called resonant. If the number of adherents to the pendulum decreases, its oscillations die out. When there are no adherents at all, the pendulum stops and, as an entity, dies. Here are some examples of extinct pendulums: ancient pagan religions, stone tools, ancient weapons, old-fashioned trends, vinyl records. In other words, everything that once was and is now no longer used. You may be surprised, are all these pendulums? Yes, any structure with its attributes created by people's mental energy is a pendulum. In general, any living being capable of radiating energy in one direction sooner or later creates energy pendulums. Here are examples of pendulums in wildlife: colonies of bacteria, populations of living beings, schools of fish, herds of animals, forests, grasslands, anthills, any more or less orderly and homogeneous structure of living organisms. Each individual living organism is itself an elementary pendulum, as it is a unit of energy. When a group of these individual pendulums begins to swing in unison, a group pendulum is created. It stands above its followers like a superstructure, exists as a separate independent structure, and sets the rules for its followers to keep them together and attract new ones. Such a structure is independent in the sense that it develops independently, according to its own laws. Adherents do not realize that they are acting according to the laws of the pendulum and not according to their own arbitrariness. For example, the bureaucratic apparatus develops as an independent structure, regardless of the will of individual officials. Of course, an influential official can make independent decisions, but these decisions cannot go against the laws of the system. Otherwise, such an adherent will be rejected. Even a single person who represents a pendulum is not always aware of their motivations. For example, an energy vampire. Any pendulum is destructive in nature, as it takes energy from its adherents and establishes its power over them. The destructiveness of the pendulum is manifested in the fact that it does not care about the fate of each individual adherent. The pendulum has only one purpose: to receive energy from the adherent, and it does not matter whether it will benefit the adherent or not. A person under the influence of a system is forced to build their life according to the laws of this system, otherwise it will chew them up and spit them out. It is very easy to fall under the influence of a destructive pendulum and ruin your destiny. It is often difficult to break free without loss. If a person is lucky, they find their place in the system and feel like a fish in water there. They, as an adherent, give energy to the pendulum, and the pendulum provides them with an environment for existence. As soon as the adherent begins to violate the laws of the structure, the frequency of their radiation no longer matches the resonance frequency of the pendulum's oscillations. The pendulum cannot receive energy and throws off or destroys the stubborn adherent. If a person strays from the lines favorable to him, then life in the structure of a foreign pendulum becomes hard work or simply a boring existence. Such a pendulum becomes purely destructive for the adherent. A person who has fallen under the influence of a destructive pendulum loses freedom. They are forced to live according to the laws of a pendulum and be a cog in a large mechanism, whether they like it or not. A person can fall under the auspices of a pendulum and achieve outstanding results. Napoleon, Hitler, Stalin, and the like are all favorites of destructive pendulums. But in any case, the destructive pendulum does not care at all about the well-being of its adherents, but only uses them for its own purposes. When Napoleon was asked if he had ever been truly happy, he counted only a few days in his life. The pendulum uses sophisticated methods to attract new followers who fly, like moths to the light. How often do people, seduced by the pendulum's advertising tricks, stray far from the happiness that was so close at hand? They join the army and die. They enter an educational institution and fail to master their profession. They find a job that is alien to them, but supposedly prestigious, and drown in a swamp of problems. They connect their lives with a stranger and then suffer. The activity of the pendulum very often leads to the destruction of the destiny of its adherents. Although it tries to hide its motives with all kinds of virtuous and justifiable masks, the main danger for a person who has succumbed to the influence of a destructive pendulum is that the pendulum will lead its victim away from those lifelines where a person will find their happiness. How a pendulum absorbs the energy of its adherents can be clearly illustrated by the following example. Imagine a packed stadium, a tense soccer game, passions running high, fans furious. Here is a player who makes an unforgivable mistake that leads to the team's defeat. The player is attacked by a storm of indignation from the fans, who are ready to tear him apart. Can you imagine how much negative energy falls on the unfortunate player's head? From such a monstrous blow, he should simply die on the spot. But this does not happen. He is alive and well, although he is depressed by feelings of guilt. Where did the negative energy directed at the player go? The pendulum took it away. If this were not the case, then the object of the crowd's hatred would perish. I do not pretend to judge whether the pendulum is an animated energy entity or just an energy form, and it really does not matter for the transurfing technique. The main thing is to recognize the pendulum and not accept its game without benefit. It's very easy to recognize a destructive pendulum by one distinctive feature. A destructive pendulum always competes with its own kind in the struggle for people. The pendulum has only one purpose: to capture as many adherents as possible in order to obtain as much energy as possible. The more aggressively the pendulum acts in the struggle for adherence, the more destructive it is, that is, the more dangerous it is to an individual's destiny. One might argue that there are charitable organizations, nature conservation societies, animal protection societies, and others. What is destructive about them? For you personally, the fact that whatever they say, they feed on your energy and have nothing to do with your personal happiness and well-being. They urge you to be merciful to others while remaining indifferent to yourself. If this suits you and you truly feel happy doing this kind of work, then this is your calling and you have found your pendulum. Destructive pendulums have deprived people of choosing their destiny. After all, if a person is free in their choice, they will gain independence. Then the pendulums will not attract that person to their followers. The human consciousness is so accustomed to the fact that destiny is destiny that it is really very difficult for a person to believe in the possibility of simply choosing the destiny they like best. Pendulums benefit from keeping their followers under control, so they invent all kinds of ways to manipulate their servants. From what follows, it will become clear how they do this. But in general, why am I telling you all this? Next, to explain what it means to choose your destiny and how to do it. Be patient, dear Transurfer. Not everything is so simple, but little by little, the picture will begin to clear up.